now being 7:04, I call this meeting to order. We are being recorded and broadcast. There being a quorum present, we are set to conduct business. And the first order of business will be, and thank you for coming, members of the public. Those of you who are here voluntarily and otherwise.
That's the whole school committee. Yeah.
Right. So, let's see. You all have copies of 4 sets of minutes, I believe. The first one being the minutes of the meeting for September 27th. And does anyone have any comments or corrections they would like to issue on these minutes? I have one tiny correction, which I struggled to find something I could correct just to prove to Anita Techley that I read these carefully. On page 3,
Sorry, which date?
the 27th, at the bottom of the page, Article 10, the second to last line, in the middle there's a parentheses that says 0.2 per ride. That should actually say 20 cents, so it should say $.20. That's the only thing I could cavil with these. Anybody else have any other comments?
Move approval as amended.
Second. Okay, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. Minutes for the meeting of October 4th.
A small amendment at the opening of the meeting. And Anita does have this. She and I went back and forth regarding this. We called the meeting to order at 7:05. We did not have a quorum present at the time. Brian arrived at 7:20. I announced at that point that we had a quorum. So Anita has agreed to a small change that will say a quorum was reached at 7:20. And that's my story.
Any other comments?
I had one, Tom. I'm just trying to find it here in this version of it. It was on page 5, and it's on about Minuteman. That must be a different date then. No, 10/4 the Minuteman date? Yeah, it is.
Oh, would you slide that microphone down between you and Christine? And
I think 10/4 was the Minuteman date. That's the date we met with Minuteman. Yeah. Right, so there was one
Yes, it was.
comment, yeah. Just trying to find it here, that was attributed to me, and I think half of it was me, and half of it was Kerry. Finding it.
What page do you want?
It was on 5 in the version that I had, so I'm just looking for it. Oh, here it is, here it is. It's at the top of 5, so it says, Ms. Reynolds observed Concord's FY20 assessment will increase due to enrollment increases. I think I did say that. I don't know about the capital assessments in Concord is outside the levy limit. I don't think I'm that smart. I don't think I knew that. So I think Kerry came in at that point.
Okay.
So if you can just
I'll just check that out, yeah.
yeah, just check with her. The first part is definitely, the second part I think is Kerry.
Okay.
That was it.
okay.
I thought I asked to see the Moody's report, but that's not in the notes.
This is,
Is that the
this
previous
is, no, this
meeting?
is for Minuteman. I think you were asking for it for the district.
No,
That was last
you did ask for Minuteman, and we did get
Well,
it.
because I received it. I
Yeah.
received it from Minuteman.
Yeah, you did ask
Yeah.
for it. and we
So
got it.
somewhere,
We're only, I'm just looking, you only have the odd numbered pages. The even numbered pages are not in your copies,
okay.
in the packet.
So maybe I'm not losing my mind, and I did actually ask
You
that.
did ask, and it is in the minutes on page 2.
You want to play that game?
So, yeah, the version you got electronically, you would have read it.
The
Okay.
version you got
All right,
electronically.
fine. If it's in there, then that'll be fine.
If there are no further comments, I will entertain a motion to accept these minutes as amended.
So moved.
All in favor?
Aye.
Okay. The minutes of October 11th. Any comments or corrections? Seeing none, I will entertain a motion to accept them. Second? Okay, all in favor? Unanimous? Okay,
I wasn't here.
you abstained.
Yes.
Okay.
That's okay. You can?
Meeting of October 18th.
You don't need to abstain.
Oh, I don't? It just makes no sense to vote on something that I didn't attend. I'm sorry.
But the open meeting law allows you to vote.
Okay, I vote to accept the minutes. That I can't confirm or deny. It's fine.
Anyone have a comment or question on the minutes of October 18th?
There was one, let me just see, one small point. I think there was a point, I have to find it now, I'm sorry for the delay. Where Mr. Banfield was asking about the athletics budget, and I think that we had more information than the minutes actually suggest. I asked about the revolving fund, and then we also discussed whether that was all of the athletics budget or whether that was in addition to the money that is budgeted as the athletics line. And that extra information just didn't make the minutes, that's all. I'm just trying to find the line where that occurred. I'm sorry. Here it is. So in response to a question, Mr. Stanton indicated that revenue in the athletic revolving account includes athletic fees for after-school programs and not include any funds raised by private or fundraising or booster groups.
What page are you on?
I'm on page 3, but I don't know if we have the same problem.
Under
I'm on page 3.
What heading?
On page 3. There were just a little bit richer conversation around that, which was, we talked about the amount of money that was in that revolving fund, and that was augmented by the amount of money that was budgeted, and that the number totaled up to about $1 million, not including what booster groups give. That's the only comment that I have. Is that I was trying to understand that. So we can include it or not. I don't really, it's not critical to me.
It makes sense to include it.
Yeah, you know.
Does to me.
Yeah.
In my opinion.
So, Anita, do you have sufficient information to?
I do.
All right, any other comments?
I move that the minutes be accepted as amended.
All right, all in favor? All right. Okay, moving on. Ms. LaFleur.
So this is just a quick item, and I realized I didn't copy this for you, but at your last regular meeting, we talked about some closing transfers that needed to be made in fiscal 18 to close some deficits, and I had just returned from a short leave of absence, and the reports that I were using didn't have all of the balances posted, and so there are no increases in the amounts to be transferred, but there were adjustments in 3 lines where the money was coming from. So we had proposed taking a bit more out of debt service, a bit more than what ended up being available after all the entries were posted, and instead we're taking small amounts from finance administration, town accountant, and street lighting. So in total, the transfers remain the same, but the particular line items have changed somewhat. So I wanted to, just to be on the safe side, bring that back to you and ask that you either make a new motion or ratify the action that was taken at the last meeting. Probably a new motion makes more sense.
What would the nature of the motion be that you're recommending?
To recommend or to approve the transfers under Chapter 44, Section 33B, and we can reference this sheet.
And that's fine, as
Yeah.
stated in the materials.
Yes.
So moved.
Second. Any discussion?
Do you have a question?
You have a question?
No, do you? You look inquisitive.
No, my question is, we did make the transfers, did we not?
You approved transfers, but what you approved included one line that didn't have sufficient funds. to transfer from.
So the transfer is gonna be less?
The transfer in total is the same, but where the money is coming from has changed slightly.
Do you know enough to tell us?
I do,
Taking her at her word
Right.
that she has in front of
Right,
her.
I'm
you know.
Sorry, I should have copied
Details.
this and put it in your packet. So from the town accountant's office, $3,553.71. Finance administration, $7,729.39. And street lighting, $19,431.16. And those, the combination of those three were coming from debt service. But after additional transfers, after additional activity was posted, that amount was not available in debt service. So we had to pull it from 3 different places.
And the total is, of those items?
I don't have that in total. These were going to fund the snow and ice deficit,
Right.
and that total was $488,696.11. But I can give you the total of these 3 if you would like for your motion.
So the debt service is still being transferred in, but you needed to find extra funds to augment the debt service transfer.
Yes.
So that we could cover the snow and ice, is really what it amounts to.
Yeah.
It sounded like there were 28,000.
And basically, we have it's our authority to
It has
make
something to
those
do with the last
transfers from
90
other
days of the
places.
budget.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm happy to review that, to go through the process again. So at the,
I think that would be prudent. I hate to do it, but.
no, that's fine. So under Mass General Law, Chapter 44, Section 33B, with the approval of both the Finance Committee and the Select Board, transfers can be made in town departments. We talked about, prior to the Municipal Modernization Act in 2016, the transfers were very limited to, there were specific percentages, like 5% of the budget was the total amount that the transfer could be made from any one line item. But the Municipal Modernization Act changed that and allowed a much broader transfer at the end of the fiscal year, in recognition that town meetings occur before the end of the fiscal year, and the town budgets are, there are far more appropriations, and so the restriction is much more difficult. Otherwise, you would have to go to town meeting to make these adjustments. So that's why the change was made. I had mentioned that so you meet at the end of July, and then your next meeting is the end of September, the regular business meeting. We were unfortunately not in a position for your July meeting to have this to you, but I had mentioned it when we had the orientation session at the beginning of August, that this is one of the things. I think we talked about the process, and I gave you a heads up that this was one of the things that was going to come to you in September, even though it would be much later than we would have liked to have had it happen, and that's why the delay in the process. So it was brought to you first at the end of September, and then I brought it to the Select Board, I don't know if it was last week or 2 weeks ago. We waited until we got past the special town meeting to get it on their agenda. And it was after that meeting in September, because I was out for a period of time, and when I pulled a report to put the transfers together, it did not have all of the activity. And so it appeared that there was some additional funding remaining in debt service that was not there when all of the activity was posted. So that necessitated going back and finding an additional places to fill that remaining snow and ice deficit.
So we already authorized the 488,000.
You did. It's just
The
the,
amount of the tweaking is approximately how much? Didn't
it
sound like a whole
is,
lot.
about $30,000.
And the books have settled now, so you're comfortable with all the transactions?
Oh,
that
yes,
posted,
yes,
You're not
and
gonna have to come
ha-
back and do it again?
No, you won't. And had I not been out for an extended period of time, I think that was, I was just back for a couple of days and just,
And has the select board already approved this revision?
yes,
They have.
they
Okay.
did.
So, yeah, so we're gonna make a motion soon, somebody makes a motion to revise our approval of, what was the date? September,
The September, you met on September 27th.
so to revise our approval of September 27th to make these.
To reflect
Adjustments.
transfers from street lighting, finance administration, and town accountant.
Exactly, the motion that I would make.
All right, so Mr. Packard has made the motion. Do we have a second? And
Including those accounts.
any further discussion? All right, we're ready for a vote. All in favor? Thank you. Okay. We now move into our discussion on fiscal sustainability. And for that, we return to the
This is
leader of Fizzy-Wig.
Carrie, were you able to get those other?
Yeah, they're coming around.
Oh,
Ah.
good. Oh, good. So, oh, this is the whole thing.
Those are, yeah. You have that. So you have that, I think, right there, right?
Yeah.
So you can pass that one
Well, I
down.
don't have it all, though. That's the problem.
Wait, I have an extra one. Here we go.
Oh, good.
Yeah.
Hopefully this is totally accurate. Yeah, so it should be 4 pages. Okay. So basically, yeah, we've been talking about fiscal sustainability and looking long range at what kind of criteria in terms of numerical criteria in terms of yearly increases we should be looking at projecting. And on the first page is basically just various criteria that we have set for basically our guidelines process. These are from the FinCom report. It's been in there for a few years. I'm not sure whether it was in there 2018, but it was in 2017. And then there's also just the general policies that we work with in terms of keeping the free cash, certain amount of free cash, the capital 8% going to capital expenses and other things like that. So these are sort of the objectives that we're trying to achieve in setting our guidelines. The second page may look familiar, and that's basically what we've been calling the Randall curve, named after Scott Randall, who's not here tonight, but who really started tracking this. And it really is showing the CPI. Unfortunately, we don't have the colors here, but if you look at the graph on the lower left, there are 3 lines. The top one is the tax increases per year, which you can see in the tiny little type at the bottom. Tax increase per year.
So that's the median household tax bill?
Yes.
Right.
Yes, that's it, yes, the median household tax bill. The bottom line is the consumer price index, And this one, it's pretty much the same as the one that Scott was using, but I just used the CPI for local region being Boston, Cambridge, Newton. Doesn't have Concord in there, but I think the next closest one is Chelmsford and Lowell. So I use that one. But it really is almost the same as the CPI curve. That's the bottom one, as the one that's been in there. Now there's the middle one, which is the increase in employee costs, which would be wages and benefits over time. Because one of the criteria that we're looking at is that that would be on page 1, the last bullet in the first grouping there. The taxpayers are not burdened beyond what typical expectations of income growth can accommodate. So these are the expectations of income growth, or the past income growth. That is,
Can I interrupt for just a second? If I look at the legend on the bottom of this graph,
yep,
it's showing that one of these lines, I don't know which one is the median tax bill if it grew with CPI. And the next one's...
yes, okay, that was what Scott did. So he took the tax bill from the starting year and increased it by the CPI percent increase.
Okay, so
Instead
which-
of the bottom line.
So
Which
that's
line?
That's the middle line.
That's the middle one.
No, that's the bottom line. I'm sorry, that's the bottom. Yeah, it'd be great if the colors were here, but
That's the bottom.
yeah, the bottom line is the CPI line. The top line is the tax bill, and the middle line is the wage and benefits. And those two
Got it.
lower lines are taking basically the tax bill from 2007 and increasing it at a rate by these indicators,
by the CPI.
by the CPI or the increase in wages.
So
The middle one is the wages.
So we think that the middle line, Carl, instructs us more closely to the kinds of services that the town and the school systems are providing because they're heavily weighted towards payroll.
No, it's got nothing to do with town payroll.
No, I know, I'm just saying that this is.
Yeah, these are salaries in general.
This is just saying salaries in general
Yeah.
are rising at these rates.
Yes.
And because our budgets are very heavily weighted towards salaries, they will probably hew a little more closely to the salary increase deltas that we see in the middle line than
They
the
don't.
CPI generally.
They don't.
Well, you know, they don't, because they're obviously
Yeah.
growing at a much faster clip
Yes.
than that.
Yeah.
But to.
That might be a rational.
Might be a rational thing to
Yeah.
consider is because of the heavy component of labor in a government and educational setting, that our budgets would be more likely to be closer to the employment delta line.
Yeah, that's a good, point, yep.
It's just, I'm just trying to understand why that's on there. It's just, it seems.
Well, it really was addressing that taxpayers are not burdened beyond what the typical.
So it's also in there to say,
Income
the
growth would be.
homeowners, people who are paying the taxes, this is what they can expect in terms of their own employment
Right.
wage growth. And if somehow that's also, if our taxes are outstripping that, then it seriously is where the problems are coming.
Yes.
Okay, thanks.
That-
It actually, I think, instructs us on both vectors.
Mhm.
It sort of helps us understand that our town's budgets need to be probably biased higher than straight CPI because of the heavy labor component that is part of these budgets.
Yeah.
But at the same time, taxpayers whose primary source of income is wages are also constrained and can't necessarily afford to see tax rates that outstrip their capacity to pay, the employment payment.
Right.
So it's interesting on two fronts to me.
Yeah.
This is historic,
Yeah, I understand.
but,
It's historic.
yeah, up to basically 20,
Like 60.
I think it's 2017. That's the other thing, Scott, when he did this, if you look at like up at the top, like the tax rate, for 16 he has 1407. Well, that was actually the tax rate for FY 17. So I think he was going by calendar years, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics goes by calendar years too. So that's probably why he went with the calendar years. But and so that's basically what I did too.
Fair enough.
Yeah. So back, I guess if we're talking about town fiscal years, you kind of take that all those columns up at the top and shift them over one
6 months.
notch to the right. But
So
the
Carl,
story is the same.
one thing we tried to get last year was a breakdown of income growth by quintile that we were not very successful at getting data for. Because as we know, because income inequality and growth in income, growth rates of income have been very different depending on where you are in that spectrum. It could be that, if the median household income in Concord is $138,000, those above that level might have had incomes growing at higher rates, but by definition, half the people have incomes lower than that, which could, in fact, have been growing at a lot slower rate.
Right. Yeah.
So it's the bottom. Well, it could be as big as the bottom half of the population in Concord, of the tax base in Concord, that has experienced income growth rates even slower than this average implies. So until and unless we can get some of that data, it's hard to.
It is, and the data on the wage growth is there's a huge amount of it. But what you can learn from it is that's another question. They have basically different rates for every type of job you can imagine. Okay, plumbers, doctors, lawyers, university professors, janitors, everything.
Is it also regionalized, Carl?
Actually, I didn't find that the wage growth was regionalized. I might be able to do that, but certainly the CPI is regionalized. But the wage thing, that was basically the overall. They have one group of data for overall wage growth. So that's what I used for that, figuring. Partially is that, we've talked about this, one of the things that we don't want to be doing, we want to keep income diversity in town to the extent that it's possible, practical. So rather than going and trying to sort out, weighting it for, this amount for architects, this amount for lawyers, that sort of thing. I just took the cumulative number. And that was, and also that was national too. I didn't really find, but these data sets they're huge, and it's a Bureau of Labor Statistics. They have a lot of information, but it's a lot to sort through. Yeah. So that was okay. So that's basically kind of the picture. When we had our last fiscal sustainability working group meeting back in the summer, we proposed to use a 5-year rolling average of CPI as an indicator. Right? Mm-hmm. I'm looking at people who were at the meeting. Everybody else was on vacation. But, so that was what we had proposed, was using the 5-year rolling average. And so on the next page, we have the 5-year rolling averages, basically, you know, for several years, but the 5-year rolling average would, for, you know, this time would be because we don't have the CPI for 2018 totally yet. You can get CPI by month too, but, you know, trying to reconcile that with the yearly thing would be difficult. So basically, the 5-year rolling average at this point is 1.51% is the increase in CPI. There's that one. And then, yeah, finally on the last page is the employment cost index, in other words, wages and benefits. And there, so that breaks out actually into two categories. There's the total compensation, which is the wages and benefits, and then there's also wages and salaries. And at a certain point, I was running out of time, so I just did the total compensation, because I think that really also, you know, tells you what people are getting in terms of compensation. So therefore, the 5-year rolling average of the increases in employment income compensation would be that bottom line, that bottom number, 2.42% is the 5-year rolling average of that, whatever it's worth.
So this data does appear to be regionalized: Boston, Worcester, Manchester, Massachusetts, New Hampshire. Is that true?
Yes, it is, yeah, because I just took the, I just copied that from the data set, yep.
It's a nice collection of data.
It is.
Well, I mean, we've generally been kind of, as a reality check, we've been looking at this CPI and this Randall curve as something, an indicator of what is happening, and if we want to keep a diverse community, we have to look at these numbers.
So, do any of my fellow Fezziwig members remember the definition of sustainability that we fastened on?
Don't have it memorized.
I think I do, at least not word for word, but at least in its essence. And I think what we settled on was that level of taxation, which over the long term would allow the town to maintain its character and its, as well as insofar as its character was included economic diversity. I think there might have been some other little parts that were hanging on that, but I think that's the essence of it.
Picking up the garbage and things like that.
Yes, yeah, that's definitely a part of it. So
The problem is we have no way of measuring that, though. We don't keep track any longer of the town employees that live in town, or the teachers that live in town. What happens is these people just move away. And that's what's been happening, we know anecdotally. The way of measuring it or quantifying it.
and
No, but we know we can't get too far away from the norms.
another piece of evidence is found in some of the data that Carl circulated, which show the prices of houses or the assessed value of houses by quintile. And I think if you look, as we did a year ago, look at those data over years, you find that the lower quintile in terms of assessed valuation, the lower 2 or even 3 quintiles is getting smaller, are getting smaller. So that's another data point as to whether the economic diversity in the town is changing. So as people concerned with running the town government, it strikes me that we've got at least 4 concerns that we have to juggle. One of them being property tax levy, the other being the level of municipal services, the level of wages paid to our employees, both the town employees and the school employees, and as a part of that, the degree to which we fund the retirement programs and other post-employment benefits. There may be others. People may, if you have other large areas of concern that you would suggest we add to this list.
You know, can I just make a comment for a minute? When I look at this, it's, you know, the picture is alarming because you're thinking, wow, our tax bills are going up much higher than any other indices that we've
We've known that for
We've
years.
known that. And I'm saying, so what it brings up to me is how much of that is because of fixed costs, like OPEB or any other thing that we have to do, and how much of that is because of the increase in services that we vote at town meetings, such as the Giroux land, or improvements to the library, or these other discretionary things. That's the question that I'm asking myself as I look at this. I would love to know how much of this gap is because of things we're required to do, and how much of it is things that we've elected to do at town meeting, maybe with or without the knowledge of what it's going to cost us in our tax bill. Do you have a feel for
Yeah,
that, Carl?
well, I mean, CPI is an accepted measure of inflation,
Yeah.
which is, you know, a good thing about, you know, helpful thing about it. But one problem is the thing that Dean pointed out, is that organizations or entities that are highly reliant on skilled labor, such as schools, town governments, and so on, tend to be going at a higher, you know, increasing at a higher clip. You know, why have university tuitions gone up, skyrocketed?
Well,
That's usually.
I have an
There's an
opinion
answer
on
to
that,
that,
but
but it's
that's a whole
it's
separate
unrelated
topic.
to our taxing problems. Yeah.
Because they're resorts now.
That is one thing.
That's one thing, that's one thing. I guess the explanation that is usually given is that it's highly weighted toward, you know, highly skilled labor.
Right. The other reason is buildings, right? So
Exactly,
It's all brick
exactly.
and mortar
It's-
when
it's the
when you look
blame.
at what colleges spend money on these days. And that would be my question in your description of the things we worry about. Is municipal services include the facilities? Because I think facilities is a big issue for
Right.
us.
They do, yeah.
Okay.
Clearly.
Well,
But I guess my point is that CPI and wages don't really collect or capture what we've agreed to spend here at town meeting on incremental improvements to the town. Or
No,
just
but they do
discretionary.
indicate people's ability to pay.
They do, I understand that, but I'm just trying to understand this gap.
So
Okay.
Mary, we might be able to backtrack and look at that portion that we talked about with Kerry at the last guidelines meeting, which is the stuff that basically could be under the lump of the non-discretionary.
Yes,
And see if we could put
yes.
together and look at the 10 years of what's happened on those items. You know, I know we don't have that ready, but yeah, so, you know,
You're right, we did. talk
and
about
we had a lot of years where our health insurance was growing negligibly year over year, despite the fact that outside of our collaborative that people worked in, you know, individuals in Concord, were here having big growth rates. We were in a really well managed plan that until this year we've had a bunch of years where the year-over-year percentage change was quite modest. So like, but understanding that what was the fixed stuff on those items, and then we know that, and I was digging around on my phone, seeing if I could find, tie into my files by the phone, that our population hasn't changed meaningfully. So
Right.
this growth isn't about a change in how many people are here in Concord, whether we look at the data set with the prison or without the prison. It's not, the growth driver isn't because of a change in population.
Right. I'm just trying to understand why, and part of it is my gut feeling is part of it is because we spend a lot of money at town meeting on things that we're maybe not always aware of what that means to our tax bill. That's where I'm going with this.
Yeah.
Like sustainability director, like, I mean, there's a whole list of things that, and I'm not saying we shouldn't have. I'm just saying, I'm not saying that at all. I'm just saying that there's a reason why this is higher. And maybe it's a good reason.
It's not all driven by discrete actions at town meeting though, because the budgets that are presented to us by the budgeting entities that we're trying to establish guidelines for also have their own momentum that is included.
That's true.
And so while the town meeting may decide that we need a new resource officer, that's rarely the case. It's more likely that a new head would be added to the town manager's budget request, as opposed to the town meeting take a specific action to hire a resource officer. It's much more common that these things are bundled into the budgeting process that we're trying to oversee.
So, part of the reason that at our last meeting, I asked if Carrie and the school committees could generate what our level service requirements would be, was so we could sort of tease that out of the whole number. And I can't give you a quantitative sense of how much extra we add at town meeting, but I think we can get to that basic number that is represented by our level service increases. And I don't know if you all had a chance to look at the email that Carrie sent. And you don't have anything, you don't have that on paper, do you? We don't really need it. It's the numbers are pretty simple.
I could put it up on the screen if you want.
Well, let's just see if we can. The essence of it was that we are obligated to a $1 million increase on a town budget, which is 28 million. Is that?
Like
24, 22, 24.
24.
20?
24.
24. Okay, so I did the numbers thinking it was 28. Shame on me, but my able colleague here is pounding out the numbers right now.
Email that I think you're referring to, Tom, indicates that the basic $1 million level service increase would be a 4.13% increase. That's what this email indicates.
Is that what you're?
I had 4.16.
Okay,
So pretty much on the nose here.
So 4.13. And on the school side, we unfortunately can't really get at it with any great accuracy, but I think we can take a very broad strokes look in that the Concord Public Schools personnel budget, I think, is something on the order of $20 million.
For the Concord Public Schools, the teachers is roughly that amount.
Right.
Personnel is a little bit more than that. It's probably closer
Okay.
to
And the total CPS budget is?
$38,246,000.
Okay. So, and I think, total increase that you're obligated to is something on the order of $750,000 for teachers?
So for the CPS right now, we're going to be starting negotiations, but the contract that is expiring right now, in that is a double step raise to be somewhat parity with the high school teachers. So what that means basically, if you're a Master's 1, you're going to a Master's 3 beginning in FY20. Very rough numbers, that accounts for about $700,000+ without including any COLA. The average increase of every single, the average increase of steps in any district is anywhere from 4 to 6%, and ours fall in that range. So if you're getting a double step, you're getting roughly, an 8% raise, and then you add in COLA. If you add in, just pulling on an average number of 2.5% maybe, then you're looking at roughly a 10% increase for those people that are not on top step.
June?
On the town's level service in Carrie's email, she referenced a number for employees that weren't under collective bargaining. Was that a number that included an increase in wages for an individual? Okay, so for my mind, that's not level services. I would assume level services would be everything held flat except for what was contractually obligated to go up. Because the HR director was, suggesting a 3% wage increase for the employees that weren't under collective bargaining. And normally, when you think about level services, you're looking at what happens if I hold everything flat except for what I am legally obligated to increase.
I think for purposes of this discussion, I would urge a more liberal view of that, one that allowed an increase for employees who weren't under collective bargaining.
Understood, but in terms of, making
What
sure
you're
that
really
we're,
committed to.
whether just for the record, that the record
With
reflects
parity.
that level services includes a 3% raise for employees not under collective bargaining, so that that's understood if somebody who hadn't heard
Right.
the prior meeting is listening in on this one, that they understand that we're using this term to include a wage increase
Right.
for employees not under collective
I
bargaining.
may have been being sloppy when I used the term level service budget.
It's not, it's just more just that we make sure that everybody understands what we're talking about.
So that we all understand, what I had in my own mind and didn't define it clearly, is a budget that does not include any new services, any growth in services,
Okay,
and does include the required increases in pay to all of our employees. So I sort of lost track of the numbers in terms of the school budget. I think we're looking at something on the order of overall with all employees, not just teachers. We'd be looking at something on the order of $1 million, I think, for a $38 million total budget. So that would be a 2.5% increase. Yeah. Okay.
For CPS? Or both? For CPS or both?
That's for CPS only, right? So we're already at 2.63, as John said, and so I don't know what the weighted average is, but we're somewhere north of 3%, just for level service, and not really factoring in what's going to happen at the high school. So this is I'm stating all this because I hope it's going to dovetail, if not nicely, at least somewhat, with our discussion of what our guideline number is going to be. So this, I think, gives us some baseline facts to work with. Somebody has something to say? I need a.
Need a break?
Kind of make sure, you know, the numbers are, got the right numbers with. So the town level service was 4.13%,
Yes,
CPS 2.1.
2.63.
2.63.
So that's 2.63 on 38.
Yes.
Yeah.
And 4.13 on 24.
Right. That's right.
So if you wanted to weighted average it, you could do it.
Right.
But the CPS contract is not yet negotiated for next year, is that accurate?
Correct.
That's right.
I mean, I think this isn't, well, I know was previous years, I mean, when we've gone through this and, you know, we start with the budget and, the increase in the wages is something that, I mean, already is driving a budget that's, you know, a large increase in the overall budget.
Right. So, I'm not quite sure how to
We never know.
draw this into,
Yeah,
draw
we're
this
going
into
into
one.
the
So
item 4, right?
I guess I'd like to
Yeah.
I'd like to return to something that Jared Stanton mentioned. On page 23 of the CPS booklet that we got at their presentation, it shows the bargaining units and the increases that have been negotiated. The teachers had a 19 increase of 2.0 and 20 and 21 are TBD because that's to be negotiated. Other units are 2.75 generally. But what he said was that because people have the capacity to move along in steps and lanes, that the reality of the situation is that the increases are far higher than this negotiated number. This 2.0 is just the COLA. Is that correct? Am I understanding what's being presented here? That's just the COLA, you know?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Right.
And then when people just sit in their chair, they move down to the next step because they're one more year of seniority. Is that where the 2.0 comes from? Just an extra year of seniority, or no? Okay, so
No,
so
it would be
what-
if you had gotten to the bottom step,
yeah, then
and then all you would be getting would be that COLA, but
Okay.
we have something like 20 steps
Yes.
for
16.
CPS. So they're, you know,
Yeah, I know.
getting
I absolutely understand how it
double
works.
bumps, and if they're pursuing education, they're moving out the
They're
lanes.
increasing
And
their-
so
their
when we
education.
talk about, like, for the secretary's unit, 2.75%, that's pretty much what the wage is gonna go up for an individual holding a job. Not so for the faculty unless can stop pursuing further education and they're in their lane and sort of, that's their lane
When they've
forever.
reached the top.
And they've reached and there's some miscellaneous other
Sure.
longevity factors that get added on as well. But it's not as though we're looking at a wage increase of 2.5 or whatever it is when we get told what the COLA number is, that for any given individual, they may be getting 10% if they're on double bumps because of
So
whatever.
would it be something we could request of the schools that we boil it down for the 3 years of the contract, which is coming to a close? In FY17, the total outlay for the teacher's contract was X. In FY18, it was Y, and in FY19, it was Z. And those three numbers would actually show us the wage growth.
No, because as you recall, we had the retirement incentive program, which let a lot of our higher paid teachers roll off and pull the
Well, that's because we're managing that number year over year over
But in
year.
terms of if you.
I know, but that's the whole
So
point.
you might
We're
wanna
trying to
just say
manage
off
the
of
big number.
FY18.
We're not necessarily worried about the individual who's
No.
doing everything they can to increase their
Agreed.
education and do what they
Agreed.
can, and they're perfectly allowed to do that under the
Make
contract.
themselves more
Yeah.
valuable.
Yeah.
They can make themselves more valuable.
So
But-
for a
but-
fixed faculty, like an X number of faculty members,
Right.
the overall pie should be growing by a certain amount and how it gets carved up among individuals and their steps and lanes
Has
is
everything to
for
do
the
with the contract.
negotiation and the contract, but that, having the whole pie exploding because there's all these other growth drivers,
Well,
not just the COLA.
So that's the thing I don't think that the FinCom has really ever grappled with too closely, which is the sort of the nut of what is the whole box cost in a given year, and then what's the delta to the following year as everybody does what they do. They get one more of seniority, and they get more education, or they take a buyout. Everybody's doing what they're going to do within that box, but we don't know what that. I don't think we've ever really.
Does anybody
explored.
really know what the future, the next,
I'm
you
not
don't know what
worried
the
about the
next
future. I'm looking. I just want to know how this has played out. We negotiated a contract that was a 3-year contract, and now we have enough data to see, well, how has it actually played out? What has been the cost increases year over year over year that contract has delivered to the town? We don't actually. I don't think know that.
I bet
And
somebody.
I'm not blaming anybody for like going out and getting a
John's
master's
Flaherty.
or getting a
No, no, no,
PhD.
no.
That's not what I'm doing. I'm just trying to understand what does it actually mean, financially to us. That's all. And I don't know that we really.
Yeah,
have
John
explored.
Flaherty used to have it if you really pressed him. I don't know whether.
We have numbers of any kind and shape that you want. He's looking at them as we speak,
You know
so.
what your payroll is. I mean, you know what your payroll is.
A little bit of rough numbers, because again, the way that I do budget is you take the current and you build on that. So I started with FY18s to build the prove FY19s to do FY20s without COLA. So roughly FY18 is just teacher salaries. So teacher salaries are, like I said, roughly 20 million, give or take, from our budget.
Okay.
In FY18, the approximate cost for CPS was roughly 19,004, and that was the salaries. That doesn't include any stipends. It does not include any longevity, any extra hours that they work. That's basic salary. For FY19, our obligation approximately, and this has changed a little bit. This was from the summer, but the numbers are pretty close. Jumped up to about 21.1 million
For CPS.
for CPS. So you're looking at a 1.6, give or take, and that's the average. And then next year, FY20, this is a very ballpark number.
That's like 5+%. Is what 20 to 21.1 is that?
Yeah. Yeah, and then for FY20 with the 0% COLA, you're looking at from FY19. It's going to jump roughly to 21,969,000. Again, that's without any COLA. That is double stepping everybody.
But are you obligated to do that by virtue of language in the existing contract?
Yes.
Yes.
So your wiggle room for the first year of the next 3-year contract is approximately 0 on the steps and lanes and what's happening to people in the steps and lanes.
No wiggle room. Meaning that we're obligated to that.
Right. And so, Jared, were the FY18 and 19 numbers without COLA also?
The FY18, FY19 were with COLA.
With COLA, okay.
So for every 1% based on the FY20 numbers without COLA would be approximately a little under 180,000 for every 1%. It's 160,000, I'm sorry.
So I guess the two numbers I'm looking at are FY18 to FY19, and those are and so with a negotiated 2.02% cost of living increase as part of the contract, and teachers doing what they do, we actually end up with a 5+% salary, increase from 20 to 21.1. So
It's actually bigger than that, I think.
19.4.
It's 19.4 to 21, but it's like 8%.
it's 19.4, I have 20, what's 19?
Yeah,
I have this
8%.
19.4
That's
over
what
here, I had a
I'm
question mark next to it because I didn't
It's
know how that fit in
19.4
with the
versus
original
21.
20. Okay, 19, so it's,
No, I thought there was a year in there at 20.
Yeah, the
Isn't it
FY
going
twenty is 21, 21.1 million.
Oh, wait, it's 19.4, and then is there a year at 20, and then
So 18 was 20.
21?
FY eighteen, approximate was 19.4.
Oh.
Yeah, so it's 8%, Dean.
FY 19.
8%.
FY nineteen, approximately 21 million
Oh,
one.
and then it's 21.9, so it's about 8%, so it's almost 8.8%.
Yeah,
so a 2%.
That's what I got.
So a 2% negotiated, COLA raise
Right.
is actually turning into an 8%, thing. Well, they have this,
Almost
they're
nice.
trying to get aligned with the high school, so there is some of that going on.
Some of that's one time.
Some of that is one time and it's not gonna
So-
continue.
I have a generic question I'd like to ask for, and hopefully get an answer from people who are better economists than I am, which is not very hard. If you have a large pool of employees that is fairly even-aged, and you make the assumption that their age distribution is such that every year a certain percentage retire and you hire a certain percentage to replace those people. And as the years go on, there are people who are going up through steps and lanes. Is it reasonable to assume that that pool of employees the cost to pay them will remain fixed?
Like the motion within the box is a steady state, is what
Right.
you're suggesting.
Right.
We've had this discussion last year.
Right, but I don't recall
The
that.
answer
I don't
is, the answer I think is no.
The answer is
The answer
no.
is that it trends towards longevity, towards the lower, whatever right corner.
But wouldn't that only be true if you had fewer people retiring? If your
Somehow-
population was aging, on average?
I think that was something that we discussed last year,
Yeah,
and
okay.
I think that
All right, I'm not
Dr.
gonna-
Hunter
I'm not
brought
gonna
to our
make too much
attention
of
that was something she was trying to manage, because that over time that was happening. It was just moving towards the more senior
Right. Right.
and more well-educated corner of the.
Okay.
But it wasn't a steady state. It was really the notion.
Okay. So, if you're curious, we talked about the 4.13% increase on the town's budget of 24 and a 2.63% increase on the school's budget of 38. The weighted average of that is 3.21%. So that's what we're looking at as a baseline, and that's not even factoring in CCHS. That's only includes. Okay. Well,
Can I ask a question? I'm going back to what we were talking about earlier about level service at the 38 million CPS budget, and I think we used a number of $1 million, didn't we?
Tom suggested $1 million, we didn't offer a number.
Okay, but I think now, based on this conversation, the number should be a lot higher than $1 million if we're learning that, in fact, raises for teachers are closer to 8%. So if that 38 million, if 80% of that 38 million is wages, and we know that they go up 8%, shouldn't that number be a lot higher than $1 million? It'd be closer to, I calculated like 2.4 million. You see my thinking?
Yeah, I
Is there
think-
something wrong with my thinking?
I think the 750,000 that Jared mentioned was including the lanes, but not the COLA. So I think you're kind of double counting, if I understood you correctly.
I thought they were on top of
I thought
each
the
other.
750 included the lanes, and you would just add the COLA to get to $1 million. That was my understanding.
But
I
you
could
have to
be.
remember, you have different groups of people here. You have some
Yep.
people who are only getting the COLA, and
Absolutely.
you have some who are still moving up the steps.
Then how do we square that with the fact that we just calculated that in a given year,
Right.
the raises were in fact closer to 8%?
Well,
That's the average, you just.
on average is 8?
No, you
Well, that
just
was
made
one year.
No, that was just the example, his example for if you were in a certain place in your career.
But we
So
have,
it's all over the place. But the
No.
notion that you
No, I
know,
think you were
The
taking the whole thing.
eight
but-
was the double step.
with the double steps for next year, it's
Yeah,
8%.
so it's 4% give or take, which is roughly a lot of districts. It's 4 to 5% is the difference between steps.
If we look at the salary estimates, it's 22 million versus 19.4, so it's more than a million, if those estimates were reasonable.
Exactly. There's another way of looking at it. Yeah, I'm just wondering if the million's too low.
So, given the nature of what we don't know, I'm wondering how sensible it is for us to put a number to our guideline. I'm wondering if our guideline shouldn't be a process or a procedural guideline rather than a number. You know, would we not be better able to get the result that we're hoping to get by simply saying, look, we don't see the room for any increase in services or increase in personnel. I'm not suggesting that that's what we say, but I'm saying, is that not a more sensible way to go about it than for us to throw out a number given the magnitude of the things we don't fully understand?
I got a procedural question, which maybe
Yeah.
Carrie or Anita can help us with, which is, I don't know that by law that we have the luxury of
Right.
not putting a
Yeah.
number down.
I mean, we have,
Is there-
there, we have this process that,
Sure.
you know, has certain milestones getting up to town meeting.
Right.
And yeah, I think we have,
We need to have a sidebar.
I'm not convinced it's, the language specifically references a number. I just don't think the language is that specific.
It says a
We have to have
guideline.
but
It
We
says
just
it-
have
it
to have
says
a
a guideline.
guideline ahead of town meeting.
Yes.
I'm not, I don't think the FinCom bylaw even references a specific guideline. I don't.
Yeah, I mean, I just researched the town meeting vote from 1976 or something, and it just talked about a guideline. It didn't it didn't say it was a numerical guideline, but it's always, I think, that's your
Historically,
practice.
It's been the practice, I guess I'd have to look at it to see how rigid the language is. You have to give them some, a guideline could be advice of some sort too.
you have to start somewhere.
To start somewhere, in, you know, the 42 years I've lived and worked here, it's always been a number, but things change.
Well, we started with a number, and I think Tom, last year, we started with a number, and I think Tom, you know, said Heather had called him up the next morning.
Yes.
What did I do?
Yeah, that number was very challenging for us, I'm gonna just say it right out
Yeah.
loud, that sent us into
Yeah,
a
but it was
really
a,
challenging place.
it was a process, and, you know, I think we got to a happy medium, comfortable medium, or a acceptable medium.
We had an
at the end.
agreement. We
Yeah.
came to agreement.
Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, we've sort of looked at what, you know, what some criteria that have bearing, and especially over the long term. I think that's really what those criteria are saying. Over the long term, you know, we just can't keep on going
Right.
at that rate forever. Well, are you trying to come up with a number, percentage, maximum percentage increase? No.
That
That's what we're
is,
supposed to
Well, that's
do.
the preliminary guideline.
that is
That's
the traditional,
the traditional thing.
Yeah,
Well, there's not nearly enough information available to do that. Well,
I
particularly
agree
without anything
wholeheartedly.
from the high school, yeah.
Yeah. So, I
Um,
think this may be a tradition that
Hey,
needs
we're
to
supposed to-
be bent a little bit.
Well, we're supposed, I mean, you know, again, we absolutely have to have it by, what, December 1st?
when you say it, what do you mean?
Whatever the final
The
guideline.
final guideline.
Well, can I just Right, so as you mentioned, the bylaw says that you have a preliminary guideline that you issue at this meeting and a final that you issue at your November meeting. The information that you have available to you isn't any different than what is presented in any other year. All you ever hear going into the preliminary guideline is a real high-level view of what either the superintendent or the town manager is thinking about including in the budget process. So I just wanted to make that clear, that there isn't anything different happening this year, or you don't have any more or less information than you have in any particular year.
And Carrie, it says in the bylaw, we have to come up with a preliminary guideline and then a final guideline, but does it define what that is?
No, I think that, I have done some work because there have been some questions about that, and I haven't come across anything that says it's a number. But as Anita mentioned, it's always been presented in a number. It hasn't been presented as your guideline is a level service budget or something like that. It's always been a % increase, either in the property tax or in the overall operating budget.
Well, it's always struck me as I don't know, I think this is my 5th time going through this process, and the first 2 times I was barely conscious of what was going on around me. It's always struck me as having an extremely arbitrary element to it.
I think in the beginning, it is kind of arbitrary. I mean, but then, we look at, what are the impacts of that number that we set? And, there's chance to revise that on both sides of the question.
Well, I think what you're seeing there, this is, remember Carrie said there are advantages and disadvantages.
Can you grab a microphone?
There are advantages and disadvantages to starting a budget cycle so early. And this is one of the disadvantages, right? You're operating with a huge lack of information. So any number we come up with is going to be subject to change, and could be a drastic change.
Preliminary guideline. It's not, it's not meant to be something final.
Yeah, and given the huge lack of the huge hole as far as information, then my default would be to say I wouldn't want to see the operating budgets increase by more than the rate on the 10-year Treasury note, which is about, I think today it was 3.12%. Of course, that bounces around a little bit, but that's based on a lack of information, and that's what I would default to.
Mm-hmm.
I'm welcome to, I welcome other opinions. But
Now,
We had some information as well, so we don't have information on all the sort of the wish list, the need for services. We don't have the new stuff in yet, particularly on the high school. So, but we do know what the tax rate is. We do know what the projected cap would be if we maintain the 4.5% under the levy. Carrie has given us that information. She also made a recommendation that maybe we use $1 million in free cash. So we actually do have one number to play with that isn't dependent on the information on the other side. So that's another thing that we could look at, is what percent is that, in addition to your idea.
See that.
Don't mind
Hopefully you're gonna help us here.
while Carrie's doing that, last year, the schools suffered something of a perfect storm in terms of having, I think there were at least 3 extraordinary factors that were driving their costs up that were beyond their control. are there any similar factors
And I
this
think when
year's?
we were here last week, we tried to be sure to share with you where we were at. There's a lot more stability. The enrollments are static. Special ed, we're working really, really hard to control those costs. And I might sit here tonight and say we think we're gonna maintain it stable and somebody moves in tomorrow, but, and then, the contract is the last piece, especially at the CPS level where we've got this equity last, gap to close that we are committed to. Everything else, we are working really hard to stabilize so that the swings aren't there. I think probably the one last piece I'll mention is our E&D, which you've now heard Moody's is commenting on. And E&D are probably our biggest driving discussions at each of the two districts. We've reorganized an awful lot, I've laid people off, we're spending money more thoughtfully. I think the burning question that we don't know the answer to yet is how much is that compensating for those other things that are having an impact? The drivers we know now, we need to get the whole big picture put together to see how much we've potentially compensated for that. But we're gonna bring you a really reasonable budget, so you don't have enough information tonight, I totally agree with that. My only may I make one more comment? I was in
Please.
Duxbury where the first town meeting in the state happened on March 8th, and we never had a guideline from FinCon in October. It was a November, December, January conversation, even with that tight turnaround. Because to run a school budget, we have to open the year first to have an
Yeah.
informed conversation with you, and then we turn around as quick as we can, so, I
Or
don't know if that's helpful.
how much do you have to add to the E&D budget to get it to where
We have a number.
Moody's wants it?
Well, Moody's guideline, they wanted around 3.5, with minimal debt.
We're at 2.
We're at 2.6,
Well-
2.7. We haven't gotten it certified yet.
What does that translate to into dollar
Cash.
terms?
300, 400 more. Which is,
The challenge there is we've got a revenue cycle to break so it's a little bit of a two-pronged discussion. Because we've been using it as revenue, which has to stop, or slow down at least. I think our hope is to wean off of it a little bit.
You're coming down the debt curve, so there might be some.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Thank you, I don't know if that's helpful enough.
Thank you very much.
We're gonna see the revenue.
Maybe not.
Working on
I should have brought Gary a few weeks ago.
You give a number while the audio's down.
The audio seems to be back up. Our mics are live again.
Was this the charts, were these the charts you were showing us last week, Carrie, that would
There was a certain amount that was available for guidelines.
It was 2.67 increase to keep the levy limit before you ate into the levy limit.
I don't see how we stay out of the levy. I think we have to chew on that. And we built it up over some number of years. I don't even know when. When did it get accumulated? This one's up as well. I can't see it. It's
It might get darker momentarily.
We could bring the lights in the room
Okay,
down.
this is the worksheet, but there was the revenue and,
Is this the budget?
yeah, the availability for guidelines.
Oh, okay. Well, mean, it's,
Is it,
the dollar amount, 2,182,724. That's, you can see that on the guidelines worksheet too. Right.
and then it was, so if you, and then if you back the fixed costs out of the 2,182,000, that left us the 647,000, is that,
The fixed costs are already backed out of that,
of the 2 million?
You're right,
Okay.
that's,
This is available.
yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
and that's without taking anything from free cash. Right.
No, that includes $1 million
It
from
does.
free
Okay.
cash. Would you like me to back that out? To see what that looks like?
Sure.
Then that would affect the
I
tax.
don't know why we wanna get off that merry-go-round this year.
Yeah,
We've been
really,
doing that
yeah.
for years, I don't know
Yeah.
why we would just,
It's the wrong year.
yeah, it doesn't feel like it's a
Okay.
good year to be doing
It's the
that.
wrong year.
What is our
What are
current
the-
free cash position?
We expect it to be about $10 million, yeah.
What percent is that, Claire?
It's about 9 to 9.5%, I think, depending on what it ends up actually being.
What were your level service percentages, Tom? And what if we just plug those into the two cells that we know?
The percentages?
Yeah, you had,
The weighted average was
Right.
3%.
Right.
no, you know, you don't need, because
You
here
don't
we
wanna
can
do
subdivide
weighted.
them into town government
Right,
and
right. So in
Yeah.
the town, it was 4.13%.
4.13. So what if we just plug it up at the, in the top?
So you wanna put the 4.3,
I think if we
You want me
change the percentage request, well, you could try to figure out the number, but can we change the percentage and have the number be back calculated, or is that not how this keeps?
I can't hear, I didn't hear what you
I'm
said.
sorry, so we can't, in this case, you have two columns where the percentage change is set to 0.
Yeah.
If we were to plug 4.13 for the town, would it calculate a new guideline, or would we have to?
Oh, no,
Manual.
it's not nearly that sophisticated. I mean, I thought I made a lot of
You could put a bunch of
enhancements to
numbers.
make it sophisticated, but we're not there.
see, and eventually get to,
Yeah, we could.
yeah.
Anyway, all right,
So what if we put in the request?
so what if we
We put-
calculate on my phone what
the number that you said
4.13
in your
of
email,
24?
1,070,000, or I can't remember the exact number.
We'll just,
4.13 times 24 million. 24.
oops,
Whoops. Oh, but it is.
I put it in the wrong place.
Yeah, that's probably not.
So it looks like 1.06 million. Let's put in $1 million. Just, didn't we have a number in your email that just said about $1 million?
Yeah.
Well, let's put $1 million. There you go.
4.13.
There you go.
Gosh.
Looks like a winner.
Okay. And then it was 2.63 for the CPS.
But that was $1 million also? What was it?
That
was
$1
another
million
half
also.
cent. Yeah.
You want, okay.
Give them a
Pretty close.
Yep. CCRSD. Now, is that our assessment, 19, or is that the budget? That just says operating assessment, so that's
Right,
our
that's
assessment. Okay. They have other issues. They have OPEB to make up. So we have often kind of quarantined a certain amount of money to help them do OPEB and then given them some sort of a increment.
think the OPEB is like 700,000, am I right?
A little bit more. I'll get you that.
Closer to
Yeah.
80,
Yeah.
so that's a big amount, and they're behind, right? So they're, if you look at what they didn't
Well,
put in on the ARC, it's
what,
another
what did they give last year,
400,000.
430 or something? What was your
Six.
OPEB?
Yeah, but if you add all the years up, it's they're
Yeah,
400,000
but if they have to get
behind.
from 430 to 700, that's a 350, that's like a 350
Yeah,
increment to
it's a
get to
big
750 or
Right,
300.
but there's,
So so the increase is what we're trying to put in here, not the whole nut. So,
We put in the assessment too.
yeah, so, yeah,
So we could,
if we put in like, if we give them,
450 or
only 75%.
480 would come out all right, I think.
Do we know the labor, the increase in, what's the labor cost at the regional high school, the increase there? Do we not?
Well, I don't know that, but if you put in 460,000,
this is guess, this is what they call guess and check.
so
Right here
so
in
yeah,
grade
guess and
school.
check, so that you can go up.
The weighted average percent increase was 3 point something?
Between the weighted average between CPS and the town was 3.21.
What if you put that percentage in, what dollar amount does that change?
3.21. Well, how about we just go here?
Let's see what we're at now, we're gonna be close to that number.
If you make
Gee, we're gonna be right on Dick's idea.
So the
Sounds good.
2.46 million is pretty close to 3%.
Okay, so,
It's
so
just-
increase the CCRSD number to say 480 for starters.
Sorry to interrupt, I have an approximate for the teachers anyway, for the region. So for the teachers, not the other ones, it's about 550.
That's what it was last year, it'll be similar.
So the other units,
So we're like
Probably
75%.
increase is
20.
75%, that's ours.
Yeah.
620, is that what you
I'd
said?
say that's, give or take, it's probably,
It's pretty give or take.
yeah.
600.
Mhm.
Might-
620, he said. So 70.
Teachers are 550, so you add in.
You know, it feels like the regions, you know.
Yeah.
So there's-
Oh,
So does that mean we're adding 620 to the 480?
no, we're gonna add 75%,
So,
right?
so if the salaries were 620, 75% of that is 465. Just to take the salaries on, and it doesn't help them with getting back to OPEB. So we need another 300. So you're at like 750, 780 is what it feels like.
Yeah, OPEB 785.
And
Yeah, I know, but the increase from
increase
what
is
last year was,
185.
yeah.
It's only 185?
The increase from last year to this year would be 185.
So that
Okay,
number should be
that's good.
closer to 780, right?
What did I just have?
Is that what, 620 and 185, that's what you're looking for?
No, well, that's for those are the,
That's the OPEB.
that's the overall as opposed to the assessment, so we have to sort of knock that back
that's
to
OPEB and salaries, and it
75%.
doesn't do anything for the E and D.
Right. And that's another 4, of course.
300.
Wait to see what Carrie's gonna do.
Okay, so it's a
You're
million
gonna change that
bucks.
number up? What are you gonna make this 480? You're gonna make this just,
I'm
What-
gonna
you
make
just
it
said-
whatever you want me to make it.
what,
Do you-
what if you put the weighted average of, what was the weighted average, 3.1?
3.21.
Can you put 3.21 in there and see what number that kicks out?
Oh, is it gonna?
No, she said that's not,
No, it
it's
doesn't
not
work
built
that
No,
that
but-
way. I asked
but-
the question to start with.
So let's move on,
But
make
if you
that
just do
number
the
700,000.
calculation, what is this number, 185?
With salary,
Six,
OPEB, our share of
Take the
OPEB,
480, 700,000.
and E and
It
D.
feels like it's a million.
Yeah,
And
go
that-
on.
that- even though our assessment is only 19, this is a million, it's
So
close to a
putting
million.
in 700 to 70% of a million.
So that's 3.31.
And can you now give us a weighted average of those three?
It's 3.31, she said, that's where
Those
the blue line
3.31.
is.
So, but in fact, what I think I heard Jared say we're most likely locked into is 805 rather than 700, which is the 620 and 185.
Can we bring up insurance if you're really looking for information? Because we're gonna take the same health insurance issues you'll have at the municipal level.
But 185.
So we expect a 185,000 increase in health insurance for the region.
Retiree and active.
Total.
Increase.
So that's OPEB plus something else, you're saying?
Yes, OPEB is 185, and this is approximately 185.
They have current expenditures on it, on
Even if it
retirees,
is-
and they also have OPEB, which is putting money
Estimated.
aside.
Right, so I'm not entirely clear what you're saying.
That's the region.
They're saying that they expect what they spend on medical insurance to go up by 185.
Insurance, 185.
It's a coincidence, there are two different numbers that are 185.
The 185 are
It's
OPEB.
altogether.
Yeah.
So they had accumulated
And that's,
problem.
and that's in addition to the 620 that we thought
That's right.
was,
Right.
lumped this in.
So we're up to
What's the 620 again?
620 is the salary increase for teachers and other labor.
So,
Do we have the ARC in here?
Yes.
yes, that's the one. So Carrie,
But it's,
I know.
over a million.
But she doesn't have it
CCR is
listed.
in line. You want to put in 990.
Yeah, but 990 is the full assessment. I think 990 is the full assessment, Tom, most by only 75%.
Yes.
Okay.
At 70%.
She doesn't have the ARC in here.
So I think there is
Carrie, do you want to increment to the ARC
742.5
and
on
then
my.
Plus 300
Incremental
for the-
ARC.
OPEB.
Is 1,299 times.
That number, 3.88%, that's like alarming.
You get 1,215,000.
3.88%.
Give us the weighted average of those
To do the salaries, the insurance, OPEB, and E and D would be 1,215,000.
3.4.
Well, I mean, you're,
She's down at 331.
It's 3.31.
it's slightly more than
Well, I
that,
just wanted
but
to
yeah.
know,
Yeah, I need to.
because this number already is scary.
Wait a minute.
So can,
Carrie, so I see the 3.31
Yeah.
in the far right column, but in that row, I'm not sure what other percentages are contributing to that as a weighted average. What?
So that number says 2.7 million, Tom. If you look up at the request, on the far right, it says request, there's a column that says request, it comes out to 2742.5. 2742,500. Put your cursor on it, Carrie, so he's,
Oh,
that one, there you go, that one.
and then looking
That
down,
one,
taking it
and now
down
take him
here,
down,
yeah.
take him down here, and there's 2.7000.
doesn't-
So it's
So
pretty
gonna
much,
be more than 3.31.
it's a little bit, it's a shade more, but not, it's not 3.43, which is the next one, which she's got on her
We still don't have the
column.
E and D in there.
Right, the 742 seems light to me.
No, we didn't
But
really
we're
make an
excluding-
adjustment for
Well,
ED
this
on
is
that.
literally only
But
giving
this
us
isn't the
the
guideline,
gains
this
of
is,
those
this is like,
3.36.
This is
preliminary
level-
is only on those three buckets that we're, calculating a gain right now. For the, in this preliminary round.
So we're doing the salaries.
oh, yeah, I
Both
should,
have been helped.
actually.
Salaries, OPEB, health, and we haven't done anything for ED improvement.
Right.
right. So, could we?
And how much does
see
E&D?
that? These are kind of the,
But they're getting a pickup in the about 85,000 and decrease in, debt service.
Okay.
That we didn't take it away
Well,
from them, that they could
I,
potentially apply.
this
to
is
END.
something we should be considering putting in a stabilization fund to fund a middle school. So if that goes down, we should
Well-
find a way to be using that capacity to be prepared for the next school building we have to build somehow. That's
Correct,
just-
right, but,
So it
Yeah.
isn't just like, oh, your debt service has gone down, so now
No.
you can buy programs
no,
because it's
I
within
mean,
your
the
budget.
towns of Concord and Carlisle are facing an issue around the fact that E&D got eaten into.
Yeah.
And the town of Concord is facing an issue that we need to somehow pay for a middle school. Right, and we had talked about that delta in the debt service, but
We haven't included any of the savings that you're finding with your.
No, but
I know,
I think that
we
we
can't
can
speak
try
to
to get
all
a,
of that, yeah.
a worst case thing and then put the savings.
I'm just,
We should make some assumptions,
Yeah, that's why it's not.
I mean, I
done.
just don't feel like this is too severe because we're adding in a bump up for salaries,
It's not
OPEB.
severe enough, because we're not covering everything.
We're just looking at some of the big ticket items.
We're not including all the big ticket items.
Indeed.
Okay, let's put something for.
well, the next big ticket driver that we're not really looking at is what would happen in special education, where they're certainly looking to try to.
Yeah, that's what
manage
Jared just
that.
was.
But these are kind
That's-
of non-trivial buckets that, in terms of the overall percentage of the budget that we put money into allowing for a manageable, like those things, those accounts to grow manageably. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And I, with that off the top of my head to understand how much of their operating budget we've, given growth to. It's a non-trivial number, but looking at just those three buckets. For preliminary.
So let's consider, say, not going all the way forward, we'll just start the process of improving E&D, that they're looking for
Yeah.
250, but we,
Three hundred
like,
and fifty, say,
300, wasn't it? 300, 400.
350.
yeah, so what if we go
That'd be a
like
good number.
100 to 150 to just get them on the road to recovery? Enough,
Oh, okay.
just like, oh yeah, here's your money that you've been draining the bank, we're gonna give it all back? I don't know, it seems like we're asking for trouble.
Hopefully, by the time Moody's we would get it up to the desired amount, though,
Yeah,
which may be sooner rather than later.
Jared, what is the 185,000 increase in insurance in percentage terms approximately?
We're putting in about 11, 10 or 11.
Same as the town.
Yeah, it's significant this year.
yeah.
Carrie, are we, has the town seen a similar? It's
Yes,
just-
we're carrying an 11% projection.
It's an uncontrolled cost. What you can do.
They can't go over 10%, right?
They can't go over 5.
Okay. You know, there's this.
Our floor is 5, their
Yeah.
ceiling is
It's like an apartment town.
5.
Well,
What are you suggesting for E&D, Carl? I sort of said, let's get halfway there, Moody's be damned, but you're inclined to listen to it.
Well, no, I guess the high school, I don't know. Let's say, let's work it out.
so I think,
100, yeah.
since the Big Bang, the final guideline has never gone down below the preliminary guideline. At least in my experience.
Christine, we're pretty close. This is, we're just.
We're spitballing here,
Yeah.
Yeah.
but that,
It
it
is
will end up.
actually spitballing. There's not enough information.
Not enough information, we do the best we can, in a low environment.
Yeah, it's usually, somebody just. Remember the first year, I think somebody just came up with, apparently the other team,
from. Okay,
So
so
what is
we're,
that
we're
now?
looking at
2.8?
2.8.
Which is 3.43.
Jerry, how did we make the transition from what I think was close to $1 million to 817.5?
That's 75%.
Oh, that's 75%, okay, gotcha. So, Mr. Jameson, is 3.45% close enough to your 10-year?
It's a little high, but rates are trending up, so we might get there.
So the question is,
He's forecasting a 30 basis point move.
Stock market's gonna
Call it
recover.
broker now.
do you have some thoughts?
Yes.
You care to share with us?
So we kind of started off with the fiscal sustainability working group trying to establish a rate of increase that town can afford. And we completely reflect now to the numbers, to trying to not enough information analyze what's being presented. So we kind of gone from one biometric, to the other.
Right.
Well,
No.
so, of course, the real line that we want to be looking at is the tax increase, right? And,
It's 3.17.
there, okay. Yeah. So,
And how much that eats into
if
the
we, I
rate.
mean, we were looking,
and
if
how much
we look at
does
the
the-
5-year rolling average of the wage increase number, but again, I think that's kind of more relevant than the CPI. They-
As the taxpayer's capacity to pay for
Yeah.
our increases.
Right,
Yeah.
and so that rolling average is 2.4.
For
I mean, I would feel better if we were getting that tax increase under 3.
Where's the line, where's the cell with the tax increase?
It's column,
she's got her cursor more or less
Page.
next to it, 3.17.
you're right there, 3.17.
With this, you know, this is the,
Okay, gotcha. Which is the 10-year.
So 3.12, yeah.
So, John, your point brings up the difference between the guideline and the guardrail. The guideline, we could say whatever we wanted, but if in fact we're contractually bound to come up with numbers that are much more than that, it's really, it's a useless exercise, it strikes me. However, where I think we can have some benefit to ourselves is if we say that this is not acceptable in the long term, and really these numbers have to trend down over a 1, 2, 3, 5-year trajectory. And that way we can begin through the process of collective bargaining to reduce the increases, the annual increases to which we're obligated, and thereby enable us to have guidelines that are lower. But I think right now, we're sort of beating our heads against a wall if we,
you know, if we have somewhere last year's final guideline.
0.86 or something.
It's up at the top of the page.
Oh,
Is it? No, it's not up.
There's your budget.
Let's,
No, I don't know that I do, but I will look. Got a Dropbox drive here somewhere.
What did I do? Did I do the right column? Yeah, that's
Don't look
19,
at me.
sorry.
Sheer luck.
I mean, one thing on the tax graph line, we have, the curve has been bending over the last. Terry, what is that? Before tax?
The tax bill?
The tax increase.
That's the overall guideline increase.
Tax bill has been going up.
And how much are we,
The rate of
The
increase
rate.
has been slowing.
Yes.
Yeah.
closer, how much closer does that get us to the levy limit?
The rate
It's
is.
flattening out. What?
We're at,
Trouble.
we're starting
We have some information on some of those budget amounts, you know, any of this discussion.
unused levy limits.
And
Well, what we're
we-
looking for is a preliminary guideline.
We've got in there
We
today,
have
what
to,
do
we
we,
have to look at the tax impacts and, you know, look at some of the cost drivers.
387?
What we're not seeing here is any of the savings that we're getting from the zero-based budgeting
Yeah.
exercise. We're not seeing it.
I mean, I wouldn't say that this is the guideline. I don't.
But I don't know,
Well,
unless,
but you give them, you know, as structured, at least at the region. We didn't give the benefit of growth of any line items other than the 4 that played into the calculation of the 817.5. So
So
those items are currently being held flat, you didn't give them any sort of
they're
incremental
flat,
bump.
right, but
So,
I
right,
think-
so they're not being allowed to grow, but we're not seeing any savings, and I
Exactly.
think that, given that everybody's sitting here in the room, they know we wanna seize as much as possible that we recover the savings, because we're trying to help them replenish E&D, right? In terms of building this number.
we have the E&D in there again.
No, I know, but, you know,
There's still the special ed wild card.
right.
But there are actions being taken to, of course, you can't really control special ed, but there are actions that are being taken that maybe
Somebody
get that
moves
under
in
control.
mid-year or something and,
Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
One of the things that always,
our final guideline appears to have been 3.6 last year. I think,
Wait,
Last year.
no.
yes. It's like 3,
Does that sound okay?
does that sound correct?
No,
No.
I think it's 4.9 blended because the district was what, 985 or 8, let me,
yes,
The district was
I don't know.
897, is that,
Okay.
does that sound right?
yeah, because
Yeah, it
of
does.
the shift.
enrollment.
I just don't know if the sheet I'm looking at is a final sheet or not, that's all.
Yeah.
This is not it either.
Carl, remind me of the custom, we have a weighted average guideline, but we issue it as separate percentages for.
Yes. Just coming up with the overall one, lets us see what we're doing to
Right.
the levy limit.
So I'm tax. I have a feeling that we can beat this horse for as long as we want to, and we're not really going to get it to get up and work for us. So I would be open to someone making a motion that we accept as the preliminary guidelines those 3 numbers that we have in column 7, the top of column 7, the 4.13, 2.61, and 4.27. And we wait and see what we see.
Can we understand what how much we're eating into the levy limit from this sheet. I don't,
387.
which,
Three
oh,
eight-
unused levy capacity over there.
Yeah, so we're, this is the dollar
There's the
amount.
dollar, that's not insignificant.
Yeah.
387.
3.567,
Yeah,
3
see,
million
that's the other
five
thing. I
six
mean,
seven.
there's a certain increase level at which we start eating up that excess levy limit really fast.
Yeah.
4 years.
Yeah. That was one of the instructive things that the 5-year,
Yeah.
model was telling us, was that levy limit is,
So can I ask a stupid
we are
question?
chewing into it.
Why are we trying to keep the levy limit so high? What's the
Well,
goal there?
we're,
To avoid an override?
Yes.
Maybe that's what we need.
Maintain
Maybe that's what we
flexibility
need.
and to be in a position to deal with unforeseen.
Maybe that's where we need to go
Problems.
though, to find out the will of the town, if they really want an override.
Well, there are some towns that do budget that way. They purposely take themselves right to the limit.
Right.
But the question is that how you want it? Is that what
I
we
don't
want?
But
know.
then, does that, again, put you in a position to be able to deal with unforeseen costs and unforeseen circumstances?
You would certainly have less flexibility because
Yes.
you'd have to do an override vote
Right. Yeah.
frequently to.
Sure.
Never mind.
You never figured out what last year's final guideline was?
It's 490. The blended was 4.90.
4.901.
Carrie, do you remember what it was after we took out the fact that we had a shift in enrollment? Because remember we took out, I think it was $500,000, that was because of a shift in enrollment? It was a huge chunk,
Yeah,
so.
I'd
I'm
have
sorry,
to, I'd have
that's
to
a
go
hard
back
question,
and
I
look
understand.
at that.
Yeah.
So this here shows what your history is in unused levy limit. So you can see, not that long ago in fiscal 10, we were under $1 million. And then it grew over time to a high in fiscal 17, and it's been fairly consistent.
somehow from 10 to 15, we just kept adding capacity. I don't know. We had a lot of growth. Well, how did we manage to like match?
Well, I think in the later years in that cycle, for sure, the new growth number was high.
And we know that that's.
So we were getting
tapering off.
income.
Somewhat.
So they would get the TN.
So you all rejected my suggestion.
I'm all over it. I think it's fun.
How about,
The audience is for you.
No, Tom, and you state that I did not reject it.
Okay. Sure. I said, I would be willing to entertain a motion that we propose the numbers listed in column 7 at the top here as our preliminary guideline, those being 4.13% for the town, 2.61% for CPS, and 4.27% for CCRSD.
As a preliminary guideline to be revisited.
but it never goes down.
Just yet.
Well, it can, but it
It
doesn't.
can, but it hasn't.
I mean, the thing
could.
is, if we have more information, and then make a more definitive statement, then we can do tonight.
I couldn't actually hear what you just said, Andrea, if you could speak to the microphone. Push the microphone over to her, would you, Mary? Thank you.
Sorry.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah.
If we have more information, And we then revisit this for more definitive
Well,
guideline.
that's part of the process anyway. This is just preliminary, and we have, we'll come
I mean,
up
we
with a
could-
final, we'll come up with a final.
We're
Anyway.
meeting next week to have, I guess usually that's the reaction to the preliminary guidelines.
Right.
Next meeting.
What I'm worried about right now is with the town budget, that guideline is, there's no wiggle room at all there, right? This is just their contractual, the $1 million just covers their payroll, right? Whereas, and I'm not sure they didn't do zero-based budgeting, so I don't know if there's any areas in there for them to save money. So we're really holding them down to just salary increases.
But I think the question that came up on the salary increase, because I asked the same question, and I think June or somebody pointed out that the salaries number that Chris had
Yes.
may have included increases in personnel that we had.
So let me just go through what that $1 million is,
Yeah, what is
because we didn't,
Good.
we broke it out between union and non-union. So what I have highlighted over here, there's about $220,000 of that $1 million is retro for union contracts that are outstanding.
Okay.
440,000 would be for the current year fiscal 20, and that would include contracts that are outstanding, but what we would project. So we have a contract, there's at least one contract that's outstanding for fiscal 19. So the retro to be paid would be for fiscal 19, and then for the current year 440 would be for any contracts that that go through fiscal 20, and anything to be settled that would encompass fiscal 20.
So the retro
So-
is because we settled something and it included increases that had not been previously budgeted, so we need to retro them.
Yes, but these are based on assumptions that we have contracts that are outstanding now that are
That will
in
include retro when they're
negotiations.
settled.
Right.
Was it a 3% increase that was the assumption, or was it because that was, I know Chris originally had a 3% increase in his
So
salary.
maybe in negotiating, if
What was the,
you're not so generous.
Yeah, it was
Maybe.
3%.
it was 3%, thank you.
And then this non-union $340,000 was a 3% assumption. And I understand the point about level services, but I think from the town manager's perspective to be able to provide parity between unions and non-unions, that assumption was included as well. And so so about 0.9% would be for union retro, 1.82% for current year union, and 1.4% for non-union, for the
Did you
total
also
of.
show something, an increment for fuel and savings in utilities? So that's
Small dollars.
Right, and so,
Okay, you're right.
Not,
yeah,
You're right. Okay, never mind.
some
Okay, so
credit.
that $1 million is just for the town to cover its
Existing
anticipated
employees.
contractual and non-contractual obligations to its employees, right? There's no headroom other than that.
there's,
We also didn't give them the benefit of the medical insurance increase.
that is, in the non-guideline section, so that's already taken into account. Yeah.
Doesn't include any kind of uptick in the cost of asphalt or any, anything.
Anything. It's too, I just feel feels tighter than the budgets, than the guidelines for the other entities.
That's been a pattern.
I know.
Maybe not a great thing.
Fair, but,
Okay, I've got, there's another hour and a half's worth of stuff on the agenda here, and I'm gonna keep you all here to do all that. So
Okay.
I'd like to sort of move along. If there's some profit to be had from massaging this more, I'm all for it, but I'm not sure I see it.
Well, I will cave to your strong will. I will move that we establish a preliminary guideline at 3.45% with a distribution of 4.13% going to the town operating budget, 2.61 to the CPS operating budget, and 4.27 going to CCRSD with the appropriate dollar numbers that go with those percentages. How was that?
You have a second?
All right.
How does the CCRSD 4.27 compare to historical experience?
Well, we had a big year last year,
Yeah.
because, and a lot of that was driven by the shift
I understand the
in
assessment
population.
shift, yeah, I understand all that.
Up, the carry's right there for you with a graph.
Oh, and I have the numbers right here. I forgot I had that.
So in the lower right-hand corner, you can just hit your
Is that,
percentage.
yeah.
So we're doing better than we did last year anyway.
So what are they this year if we move the 4.13?
4.27 this year.
So it's 3.
So the 3.9 was the average.
5.34.
So
That's
Mary-
exactly what I had. 3.6 was the aggregate.
I got a
So that was the guideline, the preliminary guidelines. Is that the preliminary
That
guideline?
looks like it's more of a
Oh.
preliminary thing, because then we ended up coming into agreement somehow.
This is what was voted, and you want the.
Well, we came into agreement because we made John Flaherty give up the 1% that he had squirreled away.
Hold on, let me just get those percentages. 413261427.
This is the third time for me, and it's been this messy every time. There's nothing you can.
So the average is
more rational.
This seems as about as rational as it gets. I don't know.
Yeah.
It's been, we've tried to like look at like some of the sub blocks of what's driving these increase proposals. I like this number. It's 2.99. I just like it.
So,
Okay, so this was the guideline, not the preliminary guideline, this is the final guideline in column G, right? And, okay, and the final guideline was slightly higher than our preliminary, is that correct?
For
This is,
19, she just updated it to be the actual, and then 20, the 20 column is what we're currently
Right, but the
voting on.
19 guideline that's shown was
No.
higher than our preliminary guideline.
Yes,
Yes.
is the actual.
Right.
So I guess what I have in this sheet is our preliminary, which was 3.4, 2.88,
wait, so the average,
5.34.
what have you done, Gary? The average was, the first number was 391, and now it's 448.
because it was only, the average included the preliminary guideline in 19 and not the final, so I just updated.
Okay, so that was the change that you made, so went from 391 to 448.
And the average is through 19.
No, it's through, I threw it, I put it in through 20.
That was the change, that you put in the 20.
I put in the 20 and the average includes 20, fiscal 20. Do you want me to take it out?
Very clearly.
yes.
Can't do
Oops. I'll do both. Well, I'll check in a second.
Yeah, it just is.
just is, yeah.
So 4.13 doesn't drive it, change enough to really change the number. That's all. So it's so close to 4.16.
This is our main job, so.
No, absolutely. No, I'm not.
Okay, so, for the town, the average over the last 1 to 6 years has been 4.17, and our preliminary guideline is 4.13. Is that correct?
Yep.
Yes.
The CPS has been 4.39, our preliminary is 2.61.
We don't have what the key minimums are, but
They,
clearly are.
they have a big number in there in 16 of 6.5, which is kind of skewing that. But 2.61 is actually, wait.
Yeah, no.
It's Google.
I don't know, I'm not finding this helpful because there are certain years that just have huge salary, contractual obligations that are skewing these numbers, so.
But the average is, kind of helpful.
Well, not if I compare the 2.61 we're looking at for the schools and the 4.39 average.
Comments, questions, discussion, June?
Given that this is the preliminary round, and that we're not wildly different from the trend line, that this is a starting point, and, the school committee and the executive team and the selectmen and women, plus our town manager and his executive team will come back and tell us what would happen if they had to, if this is the numbers they have to roll with, and we can, figure accordingly, but we're just not gonna we can't come at it any closer, and everyone understands that this is preliminary. We're not, I don't think we're being, I'm sure that all of the above reference people would say that we are being draconian, but just because they, will always,
I've
for
seen
a larger
smiles.
number to a
I've seen
smaller
some
number.
smiles out here, I want you to know.
we haven't come in and said, you gotta cut the number out of the paper or anything that's truly unreasonable, and that, for the sake of, that this is a starting point, and that with the, all the advisory that happens every year at this point is that we may be able to move higher, and we may have to move lower based on new economic information, or a citizen, we start getting citizen feedback that they are that the people we're advising think that that the numbers are too big. So.
Well, the average citizen, people come up to me on the street and say,
Yes,
the taxes are too high.
Yes, we know that when we get past January, we go to Crosby's at your own peril. But, that right now the chair has a motion that's been seconded. We could vote and see where we are on it. Just get those numbers.
So as Carl has pointed out, so the numbers, the 4.13,
Want the dollar?
2.61,
What's the dollar? Is it 2.7?
Right here. Here it is.
2.61
2817.
and 4.27.
Yeah.
So as Carl has pointed out, this is the essence of our job as a community, and so I don't want to foreclose discussion. However, if we've reached a point where
I call the question.
fair enough. All right. Unless anybody has more comment, are you ready for a vote?
So speaking based on nothing, not enough information, if zero-based budgeting delivers a 4.27% increase, which is only a tick below the average, I for one would be disappointed.
You think it's a fail?
I for one, based on nothing, based on not enough information, I would be disappointed. Now you can vote.
John, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
You would be
Disappointed.
with this increase.
What I said was based on nothing, not having enough information. If zero-based budgeting delivers a 4.27 compared to a historical average of a 4.48, was it? I, for one, would be disappointed. Again, based on nothing.
That we haven't come back, we haven't moved the curve in a meaningful way.
It's not meaningful.
Well, you know, we find ourselves in the same position every year, where we go through this exercise and we're told regrettably the contractual agreements have us over.
We have
We haven't done that yet.
And we have been, you know,
We have been pulling,
Yeah.
and, you know, the growth has, in some ways the growth has slowed, but it continues to be a disappointment that we can't make meaningful headway.
So I'd really like to have consensus on this, and I'm not really, I don't quite understand what your position is. I agree with you.
I just said that much clearer, I don't think. Do you need a unanimous vote? Is that where you're going?
No, I don't need one, but I would like there to be a consensus. And if you have some basis for voting no, I would like to hear what it is, other than disappointment. If you can tell us how to reach a different number.
Well, so I think I said based on not having sufficient information.
Right, exactly.
So based on nothing is what I was.
Oh,
But-
okay.
That's
But based on an expectation, you
Based
have an
on-
expectation that it.
only an expectation, correct.
So is it 2% or is it 3%? Where is your range? What would make you feel better?
Well, so I'm not the expert on zero-based budgeting, but I know from historical fact,
Right.
budgets have been delivered at flat to down.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is the information I'm looking for. And I've been
Well,
asking
yeah.
for it for like 5 months.
Okay. And we do know that there's, whatever they do on zero-based budgeting isn't gonna affect the contract, right? So there's a piece that's still fixed, right?
Clearly.
Right.
And it is down from last year.
All right, I think we're ready for a vote on this.
I think it would be good to push it a little more down. I could go down.
I would
I think
be
there is a
more
feeling
enthusiastic,
it would be
yes.
a little lower would be a better
Right.
idea.
There's always my 3.12.
I,
Yeah, I would go a little lower because it gives us more room to
We
negotiate.
have to figure out how to spread the peanut butter around if the number we're trying to get to is somewhere in the 3.2 range.
You know, I'd be guessing if I proposed a number.
We're all guessing. To some degree, we're guessing.
It's not that, I mean, we know the range that you're in, right? You know, it's not like we're gonna go 0 or 8%. We're in a tight range, right? So, I'm okay with the 312.
I'm not sure I can generate a number for you in the next 20 seconds.
312.
I mean, just knowing what the long-term level we're trying to get to, we've gotta, you know, keep on pushing on getting there.
Right, okay, I'm gonna say this one more time. I think that our job is not so much to come up with the guidelines and give a message to the people who are managing today, so much as it is to send a message to people in terms of how they're gonna manage in the future. And if that means, and I share your feeling that I would like this number to be lower, like all three of these numbers to be lower, if you're saying we should cut 20% out of each one of those numbers, and then you'd be satisfied that we were coming closer to doing our jobs, fine, it's a preliminary guideline.
It's complete guesswork. It's completely guessing. I guess I'm not prepared to guess. Maybe that's my problem. Yeah.
I mean, we're kind of predicting the future, it is guesswork. I mean, you know, is this budget gonna work? I mean, a budget is guesswork in a sense, it's you're budgeting for, you know, something that's gonna be done in the future. Whether it's running a school or building a
there's
building.
guesses,
I'd
but
rather
there can
it can be characterized as planning rather than guessing. You know?
There you go.
So, but, I feel we built these numbers up from really basic baselines that we are working with. It's very limited information, but I think some of the, particularly the ones we were working with for the district, we're staring at 4 numbers there that are fairly unmovable. They're fairly unmovable. I mean, okay, we could say we're not going to allow them to increase their OPEB. We're going to keep them suppressed, but we don't think that's good sound management. We can say stick with your bad E&D, but we don't think that's sound.
No, I don't,
I
I don't think that's what we're saying. Or at least, what I hear John saying is, yes, increase your E&D contribution, but find that money through savings through the zero-based budgeting.
Well, that's what,
I thought.
Rick had a motion.
You have a motion. He called the question.
well, there has to be an amendment to the existing motion, unless, we're gonna just vote on this and defeat it and start over again.
Let's see how it goes.
Okay.
So we have to vote to
Yes.
call the question.
Oh, that's right, it's not debatable.
It's not debatable.
Right.
Here we are.
I
So-
did not believe, you weren't serious, were you?
That was somewhat tongue-in-cheek.
Oh, good.
You don't
Okay.
have to worry about procedure.
All right, I thought you meant he had another.
No.
Oh,
We had piped up earlier.
okay.
Just saying.
Right, so we have to vote now on Richard's, on calling the question. So that-
Let's just vote on the numbers.
No, forget that.
Let's just vote on the numbers and see where the
Don't
chips
write
fall.
that down.
The only motion right now is,
Is Dean's.
Dean's,
Dean's, okay.
seconded by Andrea, right?
To do the
Right.
3.45.
To do the numbers that are up there on the screen.
It should be 3.45.
All right.
4, 5.
All in favor?
It's my motion, you better vote for it. Okay, we're not very far along here.
Unless somebody was.
Opposed?
Abstaining.
There's only one thing left.
Cowardly abstentions?
You should talk to him.
Jude, did you vote?
She voted in the negative.
In the negative, oh, okay, I couldn't see her hands. Okay, so it is 5,
5 to 4 to 1, or 5 to 4.
So it carries.
5, 3, and
I'm
1.
sorry, 5, 3,
5,
and
3,
1.
and
So it carries for those present.
Okay.
landslides.
We have a preliminary
Right, I tell ya.
guideline.
Divided government, you know how that works.
Can't get better leadership than that. Then we're under school. Okay. Thank you very much for being here. Thank you.
Sorry.
You were a tremendous benefit being here.
Number all, I think.
And to Jared especially.
Yes, indeed.
Take care. Nice night.
Okay, now being 9:21,
That's the yield on the 10-year.
we have no correspondence. The chair's report, I'll give you a very brief summary of what happened in my attendance at the chair's breakfast a week ago yesterday. I highly commend the chair's breakfast to anybody who wants to know what's going on across the board in the town. Frequently you learn things that don't have anything to do with the finances of the town, but it's very interesting. And I'm going to skip over everything.
What's the format of the chair's breakfast? Just to enlighten me. I've never.
So
go
the
ahead.
chair of the board of the select board chairs that meeting, and there are usually 18, 20 chairs of the committees in town. And there are some who are there every month and some who come only periodically. And you get to learn what they're up to.
You go around-
They
You
go around the
they
table,
go
you
around,
give a report.
usually in a clockwise direction.
Cool.
And they in turn report what their committees have been working on.
And is there breakfast?
They're-
Very minimal. Doesn't cost much at
So it's
all.
just in name only.
There was one time last year when there was no coffee, no nothing.
Oh man, that's harsh.
Yeah, that was-
That
That was after your guidelines.
All right, let's, the first item I want to tell you about is Jim Burns from the Concord Housing Development Corporation, who's the new chair, incidentally, who has been chair only for 6 months, I believe. He said that the Junction Village development is on schedule.
So they got their tax credits or whatever they were trying. They had to make application for some sort of
He
funding
wasn't questioned
model.
on that, and I don't.
My understanding, the application is in and they'll hear shortly, so
Right.
they're scheduled in terms of where they see their schedule,
Okay.
but the funding, it's not all systems forward.
Okay.
Right. In addition, he reported that they have cash on hand of $181,000. I haven't gone back and checked myself, but I believe that they have gotten their act together and are now publishing minutes on a regular basis. There was a period when,
Corporation?
yes, there was a period when they were not. The chair of the Historic District Commission spoke about a survey that they have put out, and they're about to have a public hearing on their, just trying to see. It is the Historic District Commission that is proposing to expand the historic
Correct.
district, and they're going to have a public hearing on that on November 14th. I'm hoping to attend myself if it doesn't conflict with one of our hearings, but the proposal that they're putting forward to expand the historic district in 2 areas could have a significant economic impact on the town in terms of the town's ability to conduct certain types of development within those areas. And so.
What are these areas?
Yeah, what are the areas?
So it's Middle Street that runs, and that's the main part, isn't it? It's from Academy Lane to the train station.
Yep.
It's that neighborhood in there.
Right.
Yep.
So what kind of development would the town?
Yeah, yeah.
It's residential.
Well,
Houses.
I really don't, in the interest of time, I don't want to go into it now, and then also I'm somewhat ignorant, so I would not want to brush up and give you a better answer, but.
It may include Thoreau Street, I'm not completely sure. Yeah.
So, let's see, now I'm coming down to, well, the moderator was there. She reported that there were approximately 400 attendees at the special town meeting, which is pretty good turnout. It's close to what we get on a first night of a regular town meeting.
Out of how many voters do we have in town, you know?
We have 12,000 voters in town, 12,000 plus voters.
About 13.5.
Is it?
13.5?
13.5. Okay. Mr. Crom reported for the school committee. He said that the high school feasibility study kickoff meeting took place on the 16th of this month. Their report on the feasibility study is due from Gale Associates in mid-December. And so that really, I think, is, you know, we ought to be watching what happens in that report.
It's a small slate of capital improvements they want to do, is really what they're
Exactly.
studying.
That's right. There was Carlin Reed gave us a report on Minuteman Network, which was pretty interesting. And I think that really is it for economic import. Yes.
Tom, I
So-
would just add, there was the one report on the Minuteman Tech, that they're on schedule, on budget, and there's a possibility that, is it Waltham or Watertown?
It's Watertown.
Watertown might be interested in joining, which would then also increase the likelihood that Belmont would come back in, which might have an economic impact on it.
Definitely.
In the future.
Yes.
So it's not that it would happen immediately, but in the future, that could be a positive development.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Tom. I'm glad. All right. So the next item is observer reports. And any of you, well, let's just go around.
So the school committee, I've been to fewer of those than I would be happy to report, has, let's see, what are they working on? They're working on their budget. From our perspective, they're working on their budgets. They've been restructuring the budget. We have a sort of an inkling of what's going on. So in the budget subcommittee meetings, they review the budgets, which are now all structured according to the DESI requirements. So previously, we used to keep our own books. Then we used to have a crosswalk process where we would then map our accounting into the way the state wanted it reported. And Jared has basically unwound almost all of that so that the way we keep our books maps directly to the way the state wants us to report up into the state. So we are now starting to get reports that really are just on a very basic basis that doesn't break out things the same way we've traditionally seen them in the budget books that we've seen in the past. It breaks them out according to the way the state wants them reported. And that is the major thing that's going on from a financial perspective over there. They've issued an RFP to get lower costs on their legal expenses, which is, that's a big savings. But that's in this report, so that's not new news. I'm just going to keep us moving along. And they've issued this RFP with Gale Associates for these capital improvements. They want to fix the road loop that goes up and past the Beatty Center and back out onto Walden Street. They want to fix the lighting along the road loop. They want to add parking. They're studying the need to put a facility down at the playing fields that has bathrooms in it. They're out of band with the building department. They are not meeting the plumbing code. They're supposed to have some actual laboratories down there, and they haven't done that, so they're going to study that. And then the other pieces of that Gale project plan are much more speculative. Do we build a field house? Do we build a track? Do we build a skating rink over on the landfill area? So those are the pieces that are part of that, but they'll probably just take that and take one from column A and one from column B when they finally figure out what they're going to cost and et cetera. So those are the major financial items that are going on at school. Yes, ma'am.
So I was at the school committee meeting this past Tuesday, and one important thing that they are doing, which warms our little financial hearts, is that they, the superintendent and the financial officer, so Lori and Jared presented where they are for first quarter. They have identified then what is encumbered, what they know that they have to spend by bucket, and then what what they have to play with. And at this point, they feel comfortable that they are going to be able to live within their limits, and that it's too early to say cost savings or not, because their special ed needs have cropped up that may offset some of the gains that they have been able to realize by not transporting kids out of district. But that tracking in real time is now happening.
It is really a breath of fresh air to see those reports. It's unbelievable. You see these columns that say, here's what we've budgeted, here's what is encumbered, that means we have to pay it over the course of the school year, here's what we've actually expended, here's what's left available in this account.
Yep.
It's just fantastic.
And then the other noteworthy item was that last night, there were presentations by faculty on what they're doing, a faculty person from each of the K-5 buildings on what they're doing around building cultural competency, and then each of the building heads presented their improvement plan. And the just refreshing thing was that the energy level of all parties was quite high, happy, engaging with one another, supportive of one another, very clearly, very collaborative, and very much a team esprit de corps among the leadership team at the schools, and it was just visible.
I'll tell you another thing that I took as a breath of fresh air, to use your phrase, was the presence of the superintendent and the finance director here tonight. And not to take anything away from the command of the figures that Mr. Grom has, but they were able, if you think that we were operating in an information vacuum tonight, it would have been much worse had they not been here.
Yeah.
And I really appreciated that kind of forethought on their part. So,
It's all for me. I just have nothing but good, it's a good administration. They're doing, things are firing on all cylinders there.
Okay, the Affordable Housing Funding Committee, I know that Tom McKean mentioned that they're gonna be coming to the select board this Monday
Correct.
with their report. And first of all, this committee is just fabulous. They've just been doing fabulous work. They've researched I don't know how many different ideas. But they're going to narrow it all down to 3 recommendations to the select board this Monday. One will be to raise funds through a budget line item, so it would be an increase to the town manager's budget that would be earmarked for affordable housing. That's one recommendation. The second recommendation would be a surcharge on building permits, which is what they had at town meeting 2 years ago. That was defeated. And the third recommendation would be a fee on real estate transfers. So when people sell houses, there would be a surcharge on that transactions, maybe as low as 0.5%. And that would be earmarked for affordable housing. So I'm interested to hear what the select board's feedback is to them on that, and then it will come to us if it moves forward.
So Mary, do any of those require state authorization at the
Yes.
legislative level?
Yes.
Like especially like a transfer tax?
Yes, the real estate transfer tax actually has been done in 2 other counties in Massachusetts, but I think we would still have to go, I'm pretty sure we would still have to go and get approval, and I'm not sure about the building permit. Do you know? I don't think that.
I don't know for sure,
I don't
but I
either.
know that at least a pretty good amount of what they're looking for is gonna require, won't be able to just enact it right away. It would require a state legislature passing.
Is the building permit concept the same thing with, if you go over a certain square footage, you're now starting to pay?
It's complicated.
Pay per square
Right,
footage.
and there's a certain amount that's excluded, so.
You
there's-
exclude this amount, then you.
It's a complicated structure that they're proposing,
Yep,
and so
yep.
we'll see.
Well, that's what they were bringing to town meeting that didn't pass, so
Right.
that's, yeah.
Well, I think that was because it wasn't really thought through.
Yeah.
But this committee has really thought things through. I mean, the schedule they put together is very thorough. So I'm interested to see. I'll be there Monday if anybody wants to go.
For, safety.
I just have one interesting comment, and I think this was mentioned last week, but the Department of Public Works, they said that the cost of Nagog Pond work was going to go up a couple of $1 million because of the delays.
Tariffs.
Because of what?
Tariffs on steel.
The cost of steel is higher.
Well, the cost of construction, whatever, it's all higher. But they said it won't have a dramatic effect on water rates because of the cash, the amount of cash they keep on hand, which they use to smooth things out. And they all looked over at me and said, see, this is why we need the cash balances, because apparently at the last We asked them
I
about
did.
why they needed so much cash.
Yeah, why do you need so much cash?
So I took the heat for you. So they said, this is why we need so much cash. So that's all
I have Minuteman, and you guys heard everything, I think, up to date through the budget presentation, so I have nothing.
I regret to say I have nothing about the school to add.
Tax relief. They reported that, I think it was out of 59 senior tax abatement applications, 49 were approved for a total of $197,000. And I guess the big thing that they discussed, and from a financial standpoint that we should care about, is that they are planning on championing the removal of the age limitation that would apply to all income levels across Concord, regardless of age, based on income and assets and the usual criteria. So that presumably would be a bigger number and would probably be something the FinCom would want to think about at a later date.
So the age thing might go away, but would the residency requirement stay?
My understanding was all the same requirements, but with no age minimum. Yeah.
And have they done any math on that?
Well, so they haven't, no, is the answer. They didn't have any estimates as to what that could represent. But the senior tax exemption, they did compare to Sudbury, apparently we're far below Sudbury's response.
Sudbury had 120.
I think the way it worked is the 0.5% would have been $440,000, which could have been an extra 7 cents on the tax bill. Then they came with the 199,000, it's gonna be an extra 3 cents on the tax bill, because they have to round it off to the nearest cent.
That's correct.
And so it creates a complication, but.
With the disparity in tax rates, that's
Yeah,
exactly right.
between residential and commercial rates. And so I think we decided to try to even those out.
Thank you.
But I think if they go, I wasn't aware that the proposed change, I think that may require legislative action again, because the senior tax certainly did.
It was expressed as an objective. I wasn't quite sure where it was in its process. Yeah. Okay. So, the finance director's report. That's excellent news. So, citizen comment?
There were enough comments tonight.
I'm fine.
All right, well, I will entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All those in favor? Get the heck out of here.
All right, well chaired.
John, you were a disconcerting presence.
Oh, I know.
There he is,